Chapter 611 The True Mastermind. An enormous vertical eye was hovering above his spiritual sea like a dark red sun, and its tentacles were wrapping itself around Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core. Those tentacles didn't force their way inside, but circled around it, and the frightening spiritual undulations caused Huo Yuao's spiritual sea to be at least twice as large. But clearly, that strength no longer belonged to Huo Yuao. The evil eye tyrant king's aura had filled Huo Yuao's entire spiritual sea, and his formidable spiritual undulations almost seemed material. The final moments were imminent, and the evil eye tyrant king's heart was brimming with excitement. Such a long time had passed, and the evil eye tyrant king hadn't felt any resistance from Huo Yuao even when he had dominated his entire spiritual sea. Huo Yuao couldn't possibly resist at a time like this even if he wanted to. What could Huo Yuao use to resist the evil eye tyrant king? Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core almost couldn't muster any more spiritual power. Once I control his spiritual soul core and infuse my spiritual origin into it, then this possession will have reached its final stages. The evil eye tyrant king was very satisfied with this body. At least, there was never any other human who had a body that could match this from his experience. Huo Yuao had a perfect body, and his element was perfect. More importantly, he was still young. Youth was almost more important than strength for an aging soul beast who had more than 700,000 years of cultivation. The evil eye tyrant king could cultivate based on his experience if the possessed body wasn't strong enough. But if the body wasn't young enough, everything would be meaningless. Huo Yuao was only a little more than 20 years old, but he was already an ultimate Douluo, and he was going for an unprecedented third soul core. How could the evil eye tyrant king not be satisfied with that? Let it begin. Huo Yuao, your body will belong to me after this. The evil eye tyrant king launched his final invasion as he laughed hysterically. Dark red waves surged within Huo Yuao's spiritual sea, and the turbulent tides and frightening spiritual power reached every corner of Huo Yuao's spiritual sea. The golden patterns that were already few in number were disappearing at an alarming speed, and it wouldn't take more than a few breaths before any traces of Huo Yuao would vanish. All the tentacles tightened and wrapped themselves around Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core. Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core that was rotating rapidly immediately slowed because of those tentacles, and spun slower and slower. Terrifying spiritual power released immense pressure at the same time and suppressed Huo Yuao's soul power, not giving him a chance to turn the tables. Dark red lines and patterns began to stretch down Huo Yuao's neck like veins, and continued down his entire body. The vertical eye on Huo Yuao's forehead had completely transformed into an evil eye, which was very vile and sinister. The possession's final step, domination. Huo Yuao's aura was almost completely undetectable in this moment, like there was nothing he could do to change anything. Tang Clan was sitting opposite Huo Yuao, and strangely, the corner of her mouth curved into a gentle smile. The evil eye tyrant king's projection was right behind Huo Yuao, and that enormous eye had been observing Tang Clan from the beginning to the end. He had to pay attention to her, even though she couldn't stop what was happening within Huo Yuao's body. There was one thing she could do. She could kill him. Huo Yuao's body was very weak during the possession process. If Tang Clan chose to kill him during this process, then everything the evil eye tyrant king had done before this would have been meaningless. That was an important reason why the evil eye tyrant king didn't hold back as he projected his spiritual power outward and continued to monitor Tang Clan. Tang Clan didn't appear like she was doing anything from the beginning to the end, like she was completely absorbed in her deep meditation. She naturally couldn't stop what was about to happen in such a state. But why? At such a crucial moment, was she smiling? An indescribable fear immediately appeared within the evil eye tyrant king's mind. He was a renowned ruthless character of his generation after all, and he didn't think about any underlying reasons at a time like this at all as he used his full strength to raise his spiritual power to the strongest possible level as he attacked Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core. Everything could only develop in his favor once he dominated Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core. Huo Yuao had kept his cool, but right at this moment, his body suddenly trembled. The evil eye tyrant king suddenly felt a joyous sensation in this moment. This happiness was like that of a night of consummation, or the announcement of winning top marks in an examination. That happiness came from his inner heart, and happiness like that was inexplicably contagious. The existence of this sensation was what caused all the dark red colors within Huo Yuao's spiritual sea to pause. The evil eye tyrant king's spiritual power was excited and waltzing around amid this happiness, like he had lost control over his spiritual power. The evil eye tyrant king's expression changed drastically, but his heart was still filled with that intense happiness. What's happening? The evil eye tyrant king didn't understand what was happening at all. Why am I suddenly developing this sensation? The joyous atmosphere suddenly changed at this moment. Anger took over and caused the dark red seawater to rile up turbulently. Dark red pillars of water surged into the sky one after another, like they had gone crazy, and they began blasting in all directions. Some of them rushed towards the evil eye tyrant king's spiritual origin, while some others surged towards Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core. The evil eye tyrant king was now truly overcome with fear. He was panicking, yet he was brimming with fury. Why? Why is this happening? Hasn't he completely abandoned his spiritual sea? Why does he seem to have control over his spiritual sea at a time like this? Why? Why is all of this happening? Nobody could answer his question, and the only thing he could feel at a time like this was that fury in his mind. Grief came after anger, and all the hysteria seemed to disappear in an instant. The dark red spiritual sea settled down, but it was filled with boundless grief. Those long tentacles gradually slipped down from Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core because of that grief, and they quivered faintly as they linked weakly, like they were sobbing children. Everything settled down within Huo Yuao's spiritual sea in this moment, but specks of golden light appeared amid the dark red colors. Bliss came after grief. Yes, that was endless joy. However, this blissfulness didn't belong to the evil eye tyrant king, but to Huo Yuao instead. That was a kind of bliss that came from the bottom of his heart, the kind that was very contagious. Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core began to rotate with unprecedented speed amid all that bliss, and dense spiritual undulations immediately enabled his spiritual soul core to radiate with golden light that shone over his entire spiritual sea. The dark red colors were replaced with eye-catching reddish gold hues. Fear. There was only endless fear left in the evil eye tyrant king's heart. The unknown would always be the most frightening, and everything that he was experiencing was unknown to him. Despite his 700,000 years of cultivation, faint light flickered in the air continuously, and two silhouettes quietly glimmered into view beside Huo Yuao's spiritual soul core, and they were also radiating with blissful emotions. That was the sky dream ice worm and the mermaid princess. They emanated gentle spiritual undulations, and their eyes were filled with disdain and contempt as they stared at the evil eye tyrant king. A vigorous icy beam suddenly surged into Huo Yuao's spiritual sea without warning right at this moment. Everything that this icy beam touched froze, and this icy beam froze almost the entire dark red sea. Even the evil eye tyrant king's spiritual origin had been frozen. A beautiful figure appeared quietly within Huo Yuao's spiritual sea. White ribbons trapped the evil eye tyrant king's spiritual origin, and her face flowed with faint smiles as rising icy mists froze everything in place. The Snow Empress. The Snow Empress had been holding back for a long time, and she finally made her move. The evil eye tyrant king didn't even know that the Snow Empress wasn't inside Huo Yuao's body. From his perspective, Huo Yuao's spirits had been suppressed along with his spiritual sea. Only the Ice Empress had managed to escape outside, and she had already burned her power to save him. But what about the Snow Empress? The Snow Empress had been waiting outside quietly from the beginning to the end, waiting for an opportunity to arise. Except, the evil eye tyrant king couldn't see her. The Snow Empress was outside the cavern, while Tang Clan's aura concealed her, and she didn't reveal her aura at all. But at this moment, she was back. Evil eye, you should be able to see the outcome as things have developed until now. I should thank you for giving everything you have to my spiritual sea. If not for that, I would probably have needed at least 10 years to increase my spiritual sea to a size that could sustain my third soul core's fusion. Therefore, I must thank you. Huo Yuao's voice finally reappeared after being silent for so long. His voice was gentle and calm, and he didn't show any emotions at all. This is all part of your plan? The evil eye tyrant king was both astonished and furious. Huo Yuao said plainly, I was in my most difficult time when you first launched your attack. When that happened, your spiritual power was in my brain, and Long Xiaoyao's immense soul power started revolting because I had used too much soul power. I was in trouble both from the outside and from the inside, and I could have crumbled at any moment. It was almost impossible for me to turn things around with my own strength. Then, you appeared. Your biggest mistake was that you wanted to preserve my body too much. Therefore, you didn't attack my spiritual soul core as soon as was possible, and chose to control me instead, while assimilating my spiritual sea at the same time. You did that because you were afraid that attacking my spiritual soul core would cause me to lose control over my soul power, and if that happened, you could only accompany me as we blew up together. That is all true. If you had chosen to attack my spiritual soul core instead, we would have perished together in the end. Fortunately, you didn't do that, and I have to thank you for that. You were unwilling to die, and so am I, because I still wish to accompany my lover for all of eternity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I borrowed the Ice Emperor's strength to temporarily seal Long Xiaoyao's violent and vigorous soul power as I readjusted and realigned my body at the same time. I didn't have any strength to retaliate against you at that point, and that was also when you had your greatest opportunity. If you had chosen to attack my spiritual soul core before using your formidable power to take over my body as quickly as possible, you might have completed your possession, but you were too paranoid because I wasn't retaliating, and you reacted logically by attempting to dominate my spiritual C for stability. Under normal circumstances, your decision would have been right, but I'm different from normal people. My spiritual C is no longer within human boundaries, because there is an aura from another world contained within it. Therefore, I was afraid of you dominating my spiritual C from the beginning to the end, because you cannot possibly become my spiritual C's true master, and neither can you wipe out my consciousness. Therefore, I reacted according to what you were hoping for. I struggled for a few moments before I stopped, while I concentrated on my own soul power to control it. My effort over that period of time finally allowed me to completely withdraw and stabilize the disorganized and messy soul power within my body, and I even managed to gain control over some of Long Xiaoyao's soul power. My situation was completely stabilized, while you also gave me a pleasant surprise because you integrated your spiritual origin into my spiritual C. I initially believed that only my companions, my spirits, could do so, but it turned out that you could, too. Therefore, I have to thank you. Right now, I have wholly absorbed my ninth soul ring that you've given me, and my spiritual power has exceeded that of any living being on the continent. Not even the beast god, Ditian, can compete with me in that respect. I believe that your spiritual power was probably at around the same standard even during your strongest times. Therefore, I must thank you. I know you really wish to ask, how have I done all this? I should tell you, too, because you will die with unresolved grievances otherwise. What you just felt was happiness, anger, sorrow, and bliss. You felt the power of emotions, as my spiritual seed contains power that doesn't belong to this world, a godly seed. The god of emotions has set his eyes upon me and my talents, and he's given me this opportunity. How can you dominate my spiritual seed with this godly seed around you? The evil eye tyrant king was over the top with fury, and his enormous evil eye radiated black waves. However, how could he fight against the Snow Empress, who had also burned her spiritual sense to integrate herself into Yuao? The Snow Empress was third among the 10 great savage beasts, and the evil eye tyrant king would have had a hard time defeating her even during his strongest times, not to mention under these circumstances. A short blade that was emanating faint mist hovered in midair, and the blade was pointed downwards. Icy blue sword light pointed right at the enormous evil eye projected in the sky. The evil eye had lost all color and liveliness, and there were only grey hues deep within his pupil, the color of hopelessness and defeat. Chilly sword light descended upon the evil eye mercilessly and brutally pierced into it. Yuao's soul power, which had been held back over so many days, finally erupted. Those whirlpools that were mixed with spiritual power and soul power rose once more, and Yuao's spiritual soul core guided them as they swiftly rushed into his spiritual sea. Whirlpools appeared one after another inside his dark red spiritual sea, and golden specks of light dispersed in all directions. Happiness, anger, sorrow, and bliss switched in between one another and suppressed the evil eye tyrant king's spiritual power to the point that he couldn't control his own spiritual power effectively anymore. The evil eye tyrant king could only look on as golden light fused into Yuao's spiritual sea continuously, and his morning dew dagger's icy radiance was breaking down and disintegrating the evil eye tyrant king's frozen spiritual sense piece by piece. Tang Wutong, who was sitting opposite Yuao with her legs crossed, opened her eyes and watched as the dark red patterns over Yuao's face gradually receded. The evil eye tyrant king's projection behind his back dissipated, and she heaved a sigh of relief as she closed her eyes once more. This time, she no longer worried about anything as she entered deep meditation. 3 years later, the Dalu Empire's capital, Dalu City. The sky was grey, and the stench of smoke and gunpowder permeated the air. The heavens were dim and gloomy, and dark clouds threatened to shower the city with a monsoon. Less than a third of Dalu City's northern city walls were still standing, but defensive perimeters of soul tools could still be seen. The other 3 sides had the same setup as soul tools resembled a forest of metal as they protected the city. However, there was an even larger and denser forest of metal outside this one, 50 kilometers to Dalu City's west, and 50 kilometers to Dalu City's north. The air was filled with insidious murderousness, and all kinds of surveillance soul tools dotted the skies. They were all pointed towards Dalu City. Vast patches of soul tools that formed numerous soul tool fronts stretched across the earth, and they resembled an immense pincer that could pinch down on Dalu City at any moment. Dalu City was the 3 native empires' final defensive line. Yes, the city was their last defense. The Heavenly Soul Empire was destroyed more than 3 years ago. The Sun Moon Empire's emperor, Shu Tianran, had suddenly passed away not long afterward, and the crown prince, Shu Yanan, ascended to the throne. The war god empress ruled the empire on the new emperor's behalf. The continent welcomed a period of peace that didn't even last a year. When everyone believed that the Sun Moon Empire had descended into disarray and chaos to the point that the war would be delayed for another few years, the Sun Moon Empire's great armies launched another invasion without warning over 2 years ago. The Sun Moon Empire had deployed 8 soul engineer legions, who had discreetly followed the Heavenly Soul Empire's northern borders towards the east and eventually broke through the Doling Empire's northern borders. They ambushed the Doling Empire so quickly that they couldn't even react. The invincible soul engineer legions used but 18 days to fight their way outside Doling City's gates. Doling City was broken before Shrek City's reinforcements could arrive. Shui lunched and took her remaining troops and escaped, and rendezvoused with Shrek City's soul engineer legions as they retreated continuously after consistent defeats. The war god empress, Ju Zi, personally led 7 other soul engineer legions and the Sun Moon Empire's 400,000 strong army toward the Mingdong mountain range, which was on the Daluo Empire's western border. The Sun Moon Empire unleashed a heavy bombardment against the Mingdong mountain range that lasted for 10 days, and forced the Daluo Empire to mobilize their main forces towards the western regions to defend themselves so that they couldn't reinforce the Doling Empire. In an attempt to break the Sun Moon Empire's pincer attack, the White Tiger Duke Dai Hao had personally commanded 3 legions of soul masters to ambush the Sun Moon Empire's armies along the Daluo Empire's northern borders that had once belonged to the Heavenly Soul Empire. However, he suffered an irrevocable defeat as the Sun Moon Empire's first batch of linked defensive soul tools supported by high-energy compression array soul tools unleashed their immense power along the Heavenly Soul Empire's borders, and they repelled the White Tiger Duke's ambush just like that. The Doling Empire had Shrek Academy's help, and they finally stabilized their southern regions into a standoff against the Sun Moon Empire. The Sun Moon Empire's 300,000 soldiers that came a month later into the Doling Empire through the Heavenly Soul Empire and consolidated their dominated territories, and they completely conquered Doling City, along with more than half of the Doling Empire's territories. The Sun Moon Empire's invasion was launched on all fronts, while the war god empress, Ju Zi, personally commanded the 3 armies. 3 gaping holes were blown through the Mingdong mountain range 1 month later, and the Sun Moon Empire's armies streamed in as they broke through the Daluo Empire's defensive perimeters one after another with support from their soul engineer legions. They broke the Mingdong mountain range and regained control over it. The Daluo Empire's armies were beaten back continuously and suffered heavy losses. Their 5 soul engineer legions that they had just established were almost utterly crippled as their inferior soul tool technology became the main reason for their defeat. The Doling Empire managed to stabilize themselves with Shrek Academy's help on the other side. However, they couldn't do anything to push back against the Sun Moon Empire's formidable soul tool fronts. Shrek Academy couldn't be in 2 places at once, and the Academy couldn't support both empires at the same time. They could only choose to reinforce the Doling Empire, because the empire was in an extremely dire situation. The continent descended into another impasse, but both the Daluo Empire and the Doling Empire didn't know that Ju Zi's true motive wasn't to dominate the entire continent in one go. The Sun Moon Empire mobilized many workers and smiths after they dominated the Doling Empire's northern regions, and they began excavating the mines and metals that they had discovered around the borders between the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Doling Empire under 2 beast-ranked soul engineer legions protection. Large volumes of rare metals were transported back to the Sun Moon Empire, and they were used to build and improve upon all kinds of soul tools. The Sun Moon Empire reduced their budget on researching and building stationary soul cannon shells. Instead, they diverted their resources and budget towards high-energy compression array soul tools. They decreased the size of their high-energy compression array soul tools continuously while maintaining their strength as much as possible at the same time. 6 months later, Kong Deming led the Sun Moon Empire's worship hall as they achieved another breakthrough in their soul tool technology. They mastered the art of absorbing and storing light, and they absorbed and stored sunlight to become persistent and long-lasting fuel for their high-energy compression array soul tools. Their equipment was oversized and clumsy even though they could store sunlight for a long time, but even so, they opened a new door for their soul tool technology. The Daluo Empire and the Doling Empire were clueless about that, and they could only develop their soul tools as much as possible with Shrek Academy's help so that they could attempt a fight to the death with the Sun Moon Empire in the future. 1 year ago, The Sun Moon Empire had suddenly launched a fierce attack from the Ningbo mountain range against the Dalu Empire without any warning, and they mobilized 12 Soul Engineer legions with more than 500,000 soldiers. They only kept 4 Soul Engineer legions and 200,000 soldiers at the Doulu Empire's side, relying on their high-energy compression array Soul tools for defense. The Dalu Empire suffered continuous defeats. The White Tiger Duke was a renowned commander of his generation, but his army strength was at an absolute disadvantage, and he couldn't do much to retaliate. The Sun Moon Empire used their months to conquer vast patches of land in the Dalu Empire's western territory, and more than half of the Dalu Empire's territory ended up in their enemies' hands. Shrek City's 3 Soul Engineer legions and Shrek Academy's powerful individuals arrived in the nick of time, and they brought new Soul tools that the Tang Sect had invented and improvised. They were barely able to block the Sun Moon Empire's ferocious invasion in the end, but nobody expected that. At a time like this, a single army with a few hundred people appeared inside the Doulu Empire like they had torn through space. More accurately put, there were 300 people. However, these 300 had a legendary reputation. They were the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion. They were the hand that protects the nation's thumb, and the only Emperor-ranked Soul Engineer Legion across the entire continent. Every one of them was equipped with a human-shaped soul tool, and each individual could reach a Class 8 Soul Engineer standard. 4 Class 9 Soul Engineers were at the helm, and they dealt the heaviest blow to the Doulu Empire's defending armies. This diversion wasn't that impressive, but because their overall strength was at an absolute advantage, this simple tactic achieved excellent results. Juzi made use of the Doulu Empire and the Dalu Empire's inertial thinking. From everyone's perspective, the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Legion was a formidable and intimidating force, but their most important job was to protect Radiant City. But nobody considered the fact that Radiant City no longer needed protection with the current situation that the continent was in. Juzi discreetly mobilized the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Legion under such circumstances, and she deployed the Legion onto the battlefield. They accomplished their mission, and with the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Legion at the helm of several Soul Engineer legions stationed inside the Doulu Empire cooperating with them, and in addition to the Sun Moon Empire's 200,000 soldiers, they pushed the Doulu Empire's armies back irrevocably. The Doulu Empire's armies could no longer stop the Sun Moon Empire's forward march. The Sun Moon Empire's greatest advantage had always been their control over surveillance and intel. They relied on their absolute dominance in high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tools. The Dalu Empire and Shrek Academy only received this news a month later, and less than 100,000 of the Doulu Empire's remaining armies retreated out of the Doulu Empire under Shui Lunchton's leadership, entering Shrek City's territory. Only then did the Sun Moon Empire's armies stop their pursuit. Juzi had been keeping her promise to Huo Yuao. Huo Yuao's 1 versus 10 challenge seemed to give everyone an extremely deep impression, and no matter how the war had developed, Shrek Academy was never attacked. This time was no exception, either. The Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering chased the Doulu Empire's remaining armies out of their own territory, and they conquered the entire Doulu Empire before they immediately withdrew their forces and returned to the Doulu Empire. They stationed their forces near the borders and constructed soul tool fronts. At this point, the Doulu Empire was no more. The Sun Moon Empire had completely conquered the Doulu Empire. The entire Dalu Empire was devastated when they heard that nightmarish news. The Doulu Empire's destruction meant that the Sun Moon Empire was about to concentrate all their strength against them. How could the Dalu Empire fight the Sun Moon Empire with their current strength? Their nation's destruction was but a matter of time. What happened subsequently proved it fact. The Sun Moon Empire paused their invasion after conquering the Doulu Empire, and it was evident that they were accumulating strength while consolidating their conquered territories. The Sun Moon Empire also began to change their tactics. They no longer launched frontal assaults, but they started to disperse their armies as they surrounded the Dalu Empire from the Sun Moon Empire, the Heavenly Soul Empire, and the Doulu Empire's borders. The Sun Moon Empire didn't want to conquer the Dalu Empire in one go, but they continuously assimilated and ate into the Dalu Empire's territory. The Dalu Empire's overall strength was considered to be the strongest among the 3 native empires, but how much of their strength could they display under such circumstances? Shrek Academy was supporting them as much as they could, but the Academy's strength was limited. They could defend a city, but protecting an entire nation was just too difficult. 3 years had gone by as the war progressed. Ever since Huo Yuao and Tang Wutong went missing, much of the Dalu Empire's southern lands ended up in their enemies' hands, and circumstances were similar for the empire's other regions. The only area that was still within the Dalu Empire's control was the area around Dalu City, as more than 80% of the empire's territory ended up in the Sun Moon Empire's hands. Everyone knew at this point that the Sun Moon Empire's position to unite the entire continent was irreversible, but the Dalu Empire was still hanging on by a thread as much as they could, and they were unwilling to give up even if there was but a single ounce of hope left. The Sun Moon Empire finally completed their encirclement, which was the current situation, half a month ago, and they finally launched their 3rd ferocious invasion. Soul tools had become mainstream on the battlefield after so many years of war. The Sun Moon Empire's research had already enabled them to use soul tools without soul power, and even normal soldiers could be equipped with soul tools in the near future. This was a byproduct of high-energy compression array soul tools and their ability to utilize sunlight. A war with soul tools was a war of attrition, and a war of how many soul tools and reserves both sides could afford to lose. The Dalu Empire could defend themselves temporarily, but they were but a single city in their current situation, but they were up against the entire continent. The Sun Moon Empire's armies were at the gates, and Dalu City's millions of citizens were mired in a stifling atmosphere every day. The Dalu Empire was left with 400,000 soldiers. The rest had either been annihilated or had deserted to become part of the Sun Moon Empire. On the other side, the Sun Moon Empire had surrounded Dalu City with 1 million soldiers, and their forces included the hand that protects the nation, which comprised the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion, the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, the Fire Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion, and the Terraclaw Soul Engineer Legion. Their main forces on the battlefield consisted of 18 Soul Engineer Legions. The Sun Moon Empire had already established many soul tool fronts, and there were 8 miniature high-energy compression array soul tools among them. They had been charging and storing sunlight over the past 2 weeks, and they were preparing to deal the heaviest possible blow to Dalu City. Inside Dalu City's royal palace, the Great Hall was deathly quiet. The Dalu Empire's emperor sat on the throne, but his face was ghastly pale, and his eyes were vacant. Everyone could see the kind of burden and pressure he was under from his dry, cracked lips, and the dark circles under his eyes. There were people who were seated beneath him, and one of them was Shrek Academy's elder son. Elder son's expression was calm, but his eyes were very dim and gloomy. Shrek Academy's individuals were seated beneath him, and the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion all had a seat. The Tang Sect's strongest individuals stood behind these elders. Bei Bei took the leaders Tangya, Shu Sanchi, Piketu, Jiang Nanan, Xia Xiao, Yu Guyi, Ji Zhuogan, Nan Qiupayu, Jing Zian, and even Sun Swen and Gao Dalu, along with the Soul Tool Hall's other individuals, were all present. Shrek Academy's elites were almost all gathered in this place. The Dalu Empire's subjects and officials sat on the other side, and the White Tiger Duke sat at the helm. Princess Juji was clad in armor as she sat beneath him. Princess Juji's expression was equally pale, and she was overwhelmed with fatigue. The war had continued for almost 2 years, and she had witnessed her enemies assimilate her country's territory continuously. It wasn't hard to imagine the pressure she was feeling. The White Tiger Duke was evidently a lot older and frailer than before, and his hair and beard had turned white. He was only a little over 50 years old, and he was also a titled Douluo. According to normal circumstances, he should be in his prime. Hey! The Dalu Empire's emperor heaved a long sigh as he slowly stood up from his throne. Your Majesty. The various subjects and officials bowed, and their voices quivered as they spoke. The Dalu Empire's emperor, Shu Jiawei, waved his hand and said, "Let us not kid ourselves anymore. Dalu City's defeat is but a matter of time. My beloved subjects, you have contributed much to the empire beside me over the years. Our defeat in this war is a result of the changing times. I consider myself industrious, but there is a gap which has resulted because of our stubbornness and refusal to advance with the times over a few thousand years. We have discovered this problem, but we are no longer able to change the situation. I am emperor to a nation, so let me take responsibility for these mistakes. At ease, my dear subjects, take as many family members as you can, leave the Dalu Empire, and submit to the Sun Moon Empire. I will never fault you for that, Your Majesty." An elderly white-haired official howled agonizingly as he went onto his knees with tears rolling down his face. Your Majesty, I swear to live and die with the country. Many subjects and officials went down on their knees, but the white tiger duke wasn't among them. There were some others who didn't kneel with sparkles in their eyes. Dai Hao's expression was solemn and serious. Your Majesty, we should only boost our army's morale, not reduce it. We will protect your Majesty's safety, even if it comes to sacrificing every last soldier. Shu Jiawei shook his head and said, I've already said that we shouldn't lie to ourselves anymore. I am very aware of how dire our situation is, and everyone else is equally aware. Pass my order, Dai Hao, to open the eastern and southern gates so that our citizens may leave. We will not hold those who wish to surrender. The Douluo Empire's emperor had relinquished his last hope with those words. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.